what we're going to do for this one is actually knit 2 at a time using the magic loop method. And so we need to learn how to cast on in order to do the magic loop. Magic loop is very cool because it allows you to knit something in the round without having to mess with having your circular needle be exactly the right size or have to use double pointed needles. And what it is you're actually working 1/2 of the piece at a time. We're going to further complicate this by knitting the two gloves at the same time, which is great because it allows you to avoid what a lot of knitters call second sock syndrome, where you finish one thing and you're so proud of it and it's so beautiful, and then you have to turn around and do everything again. So this is actually going to allow us we're going to work from one ball of yarn to do one row of one mitt, and then we're going to switch to the other ball of yarn right after that, and so we'll be doing both of them at the same time. To get started, what you need to do is figure out how many stitches you cast on, and remember we did our gauge swatch, we decided what size we needed to use. I'm going to refer to the pattern, and I know I need to cast on 54 stitches per mitt in order to start this pattern. The complication here for casting on with the magic loop method is that you have to cast on 2 at the same time while also setting them up for magic loop. The way that you do that is we're going to start off, here's our slip knot. And I need to, for the first ball of yarn, we'll call this ball A, I'm actually only going to cast on 1/2 of my stitches for the row right now. And so since I'm casting on 54 total, I'll do 27 right now. So let's go ahead and start casting on using the long tail method. And you do want to keep this nice and loose because you don't want to have this be very tight around your hand. Now, if you're not very good at casting on nice and loosely, my best piece of advice is to actually go ahead and cast onto a larger needle if at all possible. So now that I have my 27 stitches from ball A, I'm actually going to go ahead and push that down the needle just a little bit while we cast on for ball B, which I'm going to pull that in from here. I've pre-measured and tied my slip knot to know where I need to start. And then what I'm going to do with ball B is actually go ahead and cast on all of the stitches for that one, in this case 54. So I'm going to go ahead and cast on all 54 stitches, and then we'll show you what we need to do when you get done with all of the stitches from ball B and how to get back to finishing the other 1/2 of ball A. I have 27 stitches from ball A cast on and all 54 stitches from ball B. The next step is actually going to be to go ahead and pull the excess, pull the yarn off of the needle and pull it to about the middle of the cable. Then the next step is going to be to count out the 1/2 of the stitches from ball B. And what I'm going to do is actually split the yarn split the cable right in between the halfway point of the cast on stitches from ball B. So here's 27 stitches from ball B. I'm going to separate and bend my cable just a little bit, and I'm going to pull extra cable from in between those 2 stitches. And I'm going to go ahead and keep pulling all of my nice long cable until I have both of my needle tips right here. I'm going to push things all the way up. And as we can see here, now we've got, here's ball A, here's 1/2 of ball B, the other 1/2 of ball B, and now we need to finish casting on from ball A. Right now we're ready to go ahead and cast on the second 1/2 of mitt mitt A. So I do want to make sure, as I always do when knitting in the round, that all of my cast on edge is facing inside and that I'm not twisted anywhere, because of course, as you know, if you twist anything, you're going to have to start over. So this can be a little tricky at first, but what you're going to do is actually, you see, here's ball A. I'm actually going to continue casting on as usual with these pieces of yarn, but I'm going to be casting onto this needle. So it requires me to move my needles to position somewhat like this while I get everything set up. And I just keep going with the usual long tail cast on, and I'm going to cast on the remaining 27 stitches. And again, a little bit awkward, gets easier as you go up, but we're just going to complete the rest of that row. Here I have, this is all of mitt B cast on right here, and this is all of mitt A cast on right here. And the way that we're actually going to work this when doing the magic loop is we're going to knit the first half of A, the first half of B. And then we've actually got to switch and pull our excess cable through, and then we're going to knit the back half of B and the back half of A. And it's going to, so halfway through every round, we're actually going to have to pause and readjust the needles to get the cable and the needle in the correct position. But to get started and actually start knitting this in the round, the first thing that you're going to need to do is take the bottom needle here, the one that has the yarn coming out of it, and you're actually going to go ahead and pull until it's about halfway down the cable. Then you're going to bring it back around right here, and we are ready to start knitting. And so again, making sure that none of my stitches are crossed, I'm going to go ahead and start knitting into the first stitch. And the pattern says to knit the first 4 rows, so that's 4 rows is a really good time for you to get used to the process of knitting using the magic loop method, because all you're going to be doing is knitting every stitch. So I'm going to, when I join in the round, I actually like to do this is my special trick for making the join nice and neat and tight and making sure there's not a gap. Rather than knitting with just the ball end, for the first few stitches I'll actually knit with both the ball end and the tail end, just to keep that join nice and snug and secure. And so I'm just going to work 3 stitches here using both the ball end and the tail end. And after those 3 stitches, we are then going to continue with just the ball end of the yarn, and we're going to knit all the way across that first half of mitt A. And I know it seems very awkward with all of this other stuff going on. We're only concentrating on about 1/4 of the yarn here. We've got another half of the other mitt here, and we've got 2 other halves down at the bottom, and we've got extra cable coming out both sides. But that's okay. Just ignore all of the rest of it and keep moving forward with knitting the first 27 stitches of mitt A. So when you are done knitting across the first half of mitt A, it's very important that you drop the yarn from that one and pick the yarn up from B. You don't ever want to get confused about which yarn goes where. But again, as I did with mitt A, I'm just going to make sure all of my stitches are going across there and we don't have any twists. And then I'm going to start knitting into mitt B. And again, I'm going to use my trick of knitting the first 3 stitches with both the ball and the tail end in order to make my join nice and neat. So at this point I've actually knitted the last stitch from the front half of mitt B, and right now I have to actually go through and rearrange my cable in order to knit the back half of both mitts. So what I'm going to do is switch hands, and then I'm going to take this is the cable where the extra is, I'm going to go ahead and pull that extra cable out until we have both needle tips close to the front. And then I'm going to take the needle tip that I was knitting onto and pull that about halfway through so that I've got enough excess cable to bring this needle back around to join the other needle tip and have enough room to maneuver and knit across that row. And from that point, I'm just going to continue knitting And I'm going to tell you now, it will take you several to many rows to get used to manipulating your needles in this particular way and keeping track of 2 different balls of yarn. But stick with it, get through those first 4 rows, and you should hopefully have a good enough idea of how this works to start working with the actual shaping and lace portions of the pattern. But again, I'm just gonna knit all the way across, and now this is going to be the back half of mitt B, and I'm going to knit all 27 of those stitches. And again, this is very important. When I get to the end of those 27 stitches, I need to drop the yarn from ball B and pick the yarn back up from ball A before I start knitting that second mitt.